My name's Mark Powell and you're watching Cherry Red TV. On the 23rd of March, Esoteric Recordings, Cherry Red label, is releasing this box set, which is an 8-disc celebration of the music of Procol Harum, Still There'll Be More. And it covers pretty much the entire history of the band on record and on 3 DVDs. And I'm pleased to say that with me today is Gary Brooker from Procol Harum. Gary.
I am in the band.
Yes. Gary, nice to see you here. Thank you for coming along to Cherry Red TV today.
Thanks.
We have this large box set here. Did you ever think when you first formed Procol Harum that you would be talking about such a legacy of music 50 years later?
No. Not because I didn't believe, but when you're, let's say, 20 and you have your first record out, and then because White Shade of Pale did extremely well. I don't think anybody's had a better first record that did better. Not the Beatles, not Elvis, nobody.
Indeed.
But you didn't think, well, I'll still be doing this in 10 years then. Didn't think that far forward, and let alone 50 years. You wouldn't have thought that. Now it's more a question of, do we ever get to retire? I don't think we do. You just go on until you can't sing anymore or something nasty happens.
But are you still enjoying playing? You're still enjoying and making music and writing music?
Yeah, I mean, with Procol, we had 10 years from 1967 to 1977, and then something kind of happened. We felt that we'd gone full circle. We thought there was lots of other music going on that didn't seem to fit in with our style of doing things, like, you know, sort of punk and disco I'm thinking of. And it just seemed that we'd gone full circle and it was timed. We didn't stop and say, well, let's just give it a break. We kind of all said goodbye in 1977 to never meet up again. But that wasn't to be.
Thankfully.
Well, happily about 1989, I think, several things happened which gave me a bit of inspiration and made me realise that Procol Harum, in fact, was still alive in many people's hearts and minds, also in the minds of a lot of DJs, particularly in America. And many countries, in fact, if they've had some heroes of some sort, they actually do stay with them. They revere them. They don't forget about them, which can sometimes happen in Britain. You know, it happens with all forms, whether you're a film star or a great athlete or something. You know, they don't hold them up, you know, on pedestals for all that long. Mm. But luckily, there's other people in the world, and they still held us very fondly in their hearts, minds, and, you know, musically speaking. And I thought, well, you know, and this was '89, so we hadn't, you know, it was 12 years after we'd packed up, as it were, and several other things happened. The internet started, and people started. I saw some chat rooms. Somebody sent me. Well, the first one was quite funny. A man and a woman, or a boy and a girl, were talking, and she said, "What's your favourite music?" Or he said, "What's your favourite music?" And the answer was, "Oh, actually, it's Procol Harum." And the answer came from the other side, you know, who said, "Procol Harum? They're my favourite too. I thought I was the only person in the world." Which could have been true, except that lots more people suddenly joined this chat room and said, "Well, I love them too." And the transcript I read of this chat room, you know, America Online sort of thing, there was, by the end of it, there was about, in the course of an evening, there was 95 people who had all stumped up their loyalty. I thought there are people out there, you know, DJs in America also thought we're still around, you know, because we hadn't been for 12 years. So, and it was a good inspiration to know that if you did do something new, that there would be some ears out there that would appreciate that you'd done something and at least give it a listen. And so we restarted again in about 91.
And you're just about to embark on quite a lengthy tour this autumn, which will include a special show at the London Palladium with an orchestra and choir.
Yeah.
Does the idea of going on the road, do you still enjoy the whole process of touring?
Oh yes, yeah. It's in fact it's better now than it ever was, really. You know, the technology is better. If you go back into the 60s, 70s, amplifying an acoustic piano was a nightmare. When digital pianos came along, that was a great relief to me. I mean, with Procol Harum, the piano has to be in tune with the Hammond organ, and you cannot tune a Hammond organ, therefore the piano has to be tuned just before the concert or gig or whatever it is. Well, it has to be a good piano, and you can put all this in the contract. You know, has to be so much along Steinway, has to be tuned within an hour before the concert. You know, in the old days, I've been to places where there was dust over the keyboard, and the promoter was swearing he'd just tuned it down to his fingernails. So that was always a problem, but as a modern day, it's not. Even the Hammond organ, we now have a digital one. It's a real Hammond, but it sounds like a real Hammond, but it is a digital thing which, touch wood, cannot go wrong.
Yes. Well, if I may take you back to the very beginning, or perhaps just before the start of Procol Harum, you were in, obviously you were in the Paramounts, quite a respected sort of rhythm and blues based British band. You toured with notable bands such as the Stones and the Beatles. Why did you abandon the Paramounts, or why did the Paramounts stop, and how did Procol Harum emerge from that?
Well, the Paramounts, I mean, that was my first band, just about anyway, not totally first band, but we were all together, and we turned professional in 1963. In other words, we said, we are going to do this. We're not going to get proper jobs or anything. And we all committed ourselves to doing that. Although there was nothing in the future particularly, but we did actually get a contract with EMI at that point, 1963, and had a first single in 1964, which scraped into the charts. A couple more sort of hovered around here and there, but you got a lot of television appearances. You know, you'd be on Thank You Lucky Stars, or I can't remember what else. Beat Club, I think, was a new BBC Two series, and you know, and of course live appearances were very big. We had made friends with the Stones at some point very early on, from being on a gig together. I remember we actually played with the Stones on the day that Come On, which was their first single. Yes. When that came out, we did a gig together, and in fact, all hell broke loose, and the biggest fight that Deal had ever seen broke out between the local Marines and a gang that the Cray brothers had sent down to sort them out. I mean, it was a bloody affair, and we were cowering in the dressing room, me and Mick and Bill Wyman, looking out the window, seeing people almost kill themselves, you know. But it gave us a bit of time before we could actually, or before we had to wait until all the killing had stopped. We did have a chat, and they'd said, "Oh, we, you know, love the band, love the band." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, the Stones are pretty good too. You know, it's Brian Jones and everything. Yeah. They were marvellous, and they gave the Paramounts a lot of. They recommended us for the jobs that they couldn't do, because suddenly Come On was in the charts, and they were doing bigger things, and their little old R&B clubs they were doing, they couldn't do anymore. So they put the Paramounts up for those, and then when they started big national tours in the big theatres, we were supporting the Stones somewhere down there, you know, and the same thing with the Beatles, I think, although it might have helped that Brian Epstein was also our manager at one point. We were with Nems Entertainments, which was Brian Epstein's company, and we ended up on the Beatles, 1965. In fact, their last UK tour, Paramounts were on that. You know, they were both great experiences, if you like a lot of screaming girls.
Did you find that the audience were did you actually enjoy playing when you had all the screaming girls in the audience? I mean, did it take away from what you were doing on stage?
We didn't have so much screaming, but we also didn't play for long either. You know, these were the sort of shows where if you played for 10 minutes, 20, 15, or even 20 minutes, it would have been a long time. So you really had time for 4 songs, and you might even be on twice. I think we probably backed somebody as well on the Beatles tour. I think we backed a girl called Beryl Marsden from Liverpool. On the Stones things, we didn't play that long. On one of them, this lady came up and asked if... Oh, no, there was a message came when we were backstage, said, Mrs. Mills wants to know if the Paramounts can give her some backing when she's on. There's Mrs. Mills on a Rolling Stones concert. It's ridiculous. She was, for those who don't know, she was a lovely lady. She was a pianist, you know. But we said, no way, we're R&B, mate. You know, we don't do Mrs. Mills, which was a bit stuck up, or a bit, because, I mean, she came into the dressing room after this, we hadn't met her, and she said, I'm awfully sorry that they asked you to play with me. I didn't mean any offence. And we're going, sorry, no. Mrs. Mills. You know, we wish we'd have done it. But you know, we did back a few other people on some of those shows as well. But there we are. It was, but, you know, playing with those bands like the Stones and the Beatles, and I mean, many others as well, and watching their reaction, or rather the crowd's reaction to them, was astounding. We were talking about raw days there, you know.
Yes. And
the technology on stage of PAs and things was very, very basic. I mean, if you were out front, you wouldn't have heard the Stones, and if you were out front, you wouldn't have heard the Beatles.
Really?
Because of the screaming.
Yes. Yeah.
And perhaps the quality of the PA, but just from the noise from girls, it was. We always used to watch from the wings, and you could actually hear what they were all playing. And they had no amplifiers, only their own amplifiers. You know, and Charlie Watts just played loud.
Yes.
Ringo played loud. You know, and the vocals came out of these little speakers.
Fantastic.
Anyway, that was that.
So, when did you decide to sort of wind down the Paramounts and form?
Well, we did.
Procol?
We did. You know, we put out quite a few records with Parlophone, but you know, we didn't really get any big chart success, but you know, we got lots of live gigs and concerts and things, and we you know, it was going all right. But in the end, you know, we got an offer to back Sandy Shaw, and the money was all right, and we weren't doing very much, so we backed Sandy Shaw, and we did that for sort of around a British tour at least, and in the Olympia in Paris for a month. You know, so to go from being the Paramounts R&B to backing Sandy Shaw, well, I looked at it from the musician's point of view, you know, and it was something. A challenge, and she was a great singer actually. After Sandy Shaw, when we sort of stopped doing that, we then got offered Chris Andrews, who actually was with the same management. So we now got the Paramounts backing Chris Andrews, and because of what his sort of songs were, Yesterday Man and things like that, we needed to have a sax player really. We got a sax player. And Robin Trower, who was in the Paramounts, that was it. You know, he wasn't going to back Chris Andrews, and he was not going to play with a sax player. So he left, and we had to find a replacement, and that was actually the last thing we did as the Paramounts. And we stopped. I stopped. We all stopped, and kind of had enough. We'd done it all. We hadn't reached the top of the pyramid, but we had sort of had a go. We'd done covers, and I stopped that and thought I'd be a songwriter.
And so I've read in various sources where you said that was your intention, was to be a songwriter rather than necessarily form a band at that point. So how did first of all, how did you meet Keith Reid? How did that come about with your writing partnership?
Sorry. I met Keith Reid. Well, there was somebody who was a very important man in those days in London and around, named Guy Stevens, sadly passed now. But Guy was a good friend of mine. He was a good friend of the Paramounts. And one day round at Guy's, he introduced me to this Keith Reid. He said, "Gary, this is Keith. He writes words. Keith, this is Gary. He writes music." I said, "I don't write music." But he said it most forcefully. So it was obviously an attempt by Guy Stevens to join up to people. He had followed and listened to the Paramounts for a long time, Guy, so he knew perhaps what I was capable of. Or perhaps he liked the vocals, who knows. But anyway, I didn't react immediately to all of that, but I did find Keith Reid's words at home a couple of months later or something, this envelope full of lyrics, and I opened them up and looked at them finally, and these are interesting. Interesting, yes, very interesting. Weird or different, It wasn't Boy Meets Girl, or it wasn't My Baby Left Me, just blues. No, they were somebody who thought about these things, and they read well to me, and quite soon after that I had a go at writing some music to these things, and I found that I could write music to these words, or I could write music full stop, or think up songs that weren't other people's songs at last, which we'd done since I started playing. We had played covers of people's songs. Not a cover band, but we had found the songs from wherever, American R&B mostly. But and that kind of developed in my own mind. I started, originally the first few I wrote were quite generic, in that they were something like a bit of a Mose Allison song, or something like a bit of a Ray Charles song. I was sort of delving into my experiences a bit, and then I sort of finally found, well, actually you can delve into any experience musically that you've got in your head. So I started to put all sorts of things in what I'm writing, and the songs got kind of better and more interesting. Keith, at some point along the way, I told him that I'd in fact written something to some of his music, and he came down to see me in Southend, and I played it, and of course he was chuffed that, I don't think he ever said he liked it, but he was obviously chuffed that somebody had written something to one of these things, and it kind of progressed from there. But we didn't have much luck in people covering them, which, if you're a songwriter, that's what has to happen. And we had, if you wrote a song and the idea was that somebody would sing it, it was better if you had somebody in mind. We wrote one that we thought would be great for Dusty Springfield. We wrote one that we thought the Beach Boys could do. I don't know how we thought we were going to get it to the Beach Boys, but that was Conquistador, in fact.
Really?
Yeah, I wrote it thinking that the Beach Boys could do some real harmonies to these counterpoints I had going on, but that never happened. And in fact, nobody ever, you know, we tried to put these out into the marketplace, as it were, these songs we'd written, making demos, me singing and playing the piano. Not fancy demos, just that, vocal and piano. Nobody ever covered anything, you know. It's only over the space of 6 months perhaps. And by 1967, very early, it was decided, or somebody said, Guy Stevens or Keith Reid, that I'd have to sing them, you know. And we'd have to do them ourselves if nobody else would. So we thought we'd start a band. And that was the start of Procol Harum. You know, had a very clear vision of the instrumentation. You know, you've got to have bass and drums. You've got to have guitar, and we liked blues guitar, or, you know, I would say blues guitar rather than heavy rock, because heavy rock didn't exist then, you know, but it was just like some nice playing. And I'd also been very keen, and together with Keith and Guy as well, about an organ and a piano. Not one or the other, but both of those instruments playing off each other and providing a lot of power behind this basic trio of guitar, bass and drums. Or when Trower, or whoever the guitarist was not playing a solo, then it's always free for an organ solo or a piano solo. And there's always 4 other blokes backing up whatever you're doing, let alone the vocals, you know. So there's a lot of room for a lot of movement and a lot of interesting things to be going on behind.
And you know, from the very first, your very first single, Whiter Shade of Pale, of course, apart from being the huge hit that it was for its time incredibly different in its structure and sound as well. And did you envisage when you recorded that song that you thought it would be? Did you think it would be the huge hit it became?
Well, I did not know that it would become that big a hit. I thought from the moment I wrote it that it was a good idea. It was a culmination of a lot of influences. Apart from the obvious Bach inspiration at the moment, then, it had kind of a bluesy soul vocal. There wasn't much guitar actually in the White Shade of Pale, but it was very much a classical with this. I can't listen to my own singing, but it's not a pop vocal, I don't think, a White Shade of Pale. It's a bluesy. Perhaps it's very different. Perhaps it's not really what you'd expect. And I don't think the combination of the vocal and the backing and the whole effect of it is what you would expect. People didn't expect that at all. They never even heard something like that.
No.
So it sounded very, very different in 1967. To me, it still sounds different today. If I hear it on the radio, although I'm involved with it, and it's me singing it, I go, oh, that sounds different. It always sounds different. It never sounds dated to me.
No.
If you hear it coming out the radio, it just goes, and it's just there as some haunting thing that gets inside you.
Do you feel that, looking back on it now, it must have been a tremendous thing to to start something relatively fresh, and for it to be so successful and make such an impact. Do you have any regrets that you had such instant success so early on, looking back on it now? That it may have perhaps coloured people's impressions of what Procol Harum was about, or what it became musically afterwards?
I don't think you can't really expect something like that. You could expect that you'd have a hit in the UK. It might even, if you were really lucky, it might spread to America. But you wouldn't expect it to be a hit in France and Venezuela and out of Mongolia.
Yes.
And all of those people liked it. It affected them all. It's always been a bit of a mystery behind the success of that, because there was not such a thing as hype. That was pure passing a word to mouth and just hearing it and needing to buy that 45. That was all it was. There was no hype whatsoever. The industry was not ready for something. Record shops weren't ready for that. You know, they couldn't supply enough for the need. So, did we cope with it? Did you say?
Yes. How did you cope with it? It's
Well, it was a bit of a surprise. We did, you know, we believed in ourselves. Procol Harum believed in themselves. We thought that we were doing something different, and we thought we had a lot more to offer. You know, we'd only had an albums with the songs, actually, but we thought they were all that good. White Shaded Pale was not the great exception, although it seemed to affect, even when I played it to the bass player that we had, just me on the piano, and that he said, "That's a hit, Gary." I said, "You think so, Dave?" Yeah. So it wasn't just the recording that finished, it was the whole idea was good from the start. But I don't think we didn't expect it, and we weren't totally ready. I mean, we didn't have any nice clothes even, and we were number one. We had to go out shopping really quickly, you know, down King's Road, find something that we thought fitted in with whatever we were, which
yes.
was, I thought I was a Chinaman for a week or two. So I got Chinese robes and a funny hat and a pigtail. But it was a very open time. It just started, you know. I wouldn't say it was fully there, but it was right at the cups, the beginning of a very open time in music, particularly in Britain. You've gone through, you know, the Happy Beat Boys, 4 in a line, 2.5 minute single, everybody's smiling and making nice little records. But, you know, to get a bit serious about it was another matter, and it just kind of started. We were serious about it, you know. You see any old videos of Procol Harum doing White Shaded Pale, they're more serious, you know. We're not smiling pop boys. We are serious people that need to be contended with.
Well, the very first Procol Harum album has a wealth of interesting musical ideas on it, which I think probably set the stage for what followed it, the second album, Shine On Brightly. You then got into long form composition with In Hell 'Twas in I, and possibly one of the first bands to actually explore that kind of sidelong work.
Possibly. I mean, one didn't think much. We were just trying to do something different. Usually, we were trying to progress in our composition, if that's not too fancy a word for rock, and recording. I mean, after White Shade of Pale came out, Sgt. Pepper came out, but sometimes people think that it might have been the other way round, but it wasn't actually. I think the day that Sgt. Pepper came out, White Shade of Pale was already number one. So there was no relationship, certainly from a White Shade of Pale. It was not influenced by Sgt. Pepper. But of course Sgt. Pepper was the Beatles doing their next album, and it was more experimental and pushed recording much further than it had been pushed, you know, even since Revolver. So it was opening up the doors, and it was all the doors were opening, and suddenly to make an LP was, suddenly people wanted LPs. Prior to White Shaded Pale, if you like, White Shaded Pale was the last of the great singles as well as being a start of something different. For the last of the great singles, and suddenly we could especially after by the end of 1967, the world was your oyster in that people would not turn their nose up at an LP, and they would not turn their nose up at something that was more than 5 minutes long. So we'd already done nearly 5 minutes with White Shade of Pale. So on our second album rather, Shine On Brightly, we did 18-minute suite, if you like. You know, it was joined strangely by melody and other things, repeated themes. And we did pretentiously perhaps think of it as a suite. We used to call it the great work when we were writing it, but it was an attempt to just expand the horizons of what a rock group could do.
And you carried on expanding that with the third album, Salty Dog, when you got an orchestra involved in composition for the album's title track. How did you come to use an orchestra for that album?
Excuse me. Somewhere along the line, I'd always liked kind of a little bit of classical music. It was probably just the popular stuff, the things you heard regularly. I did actually have a great leaning towards what I at the time called Baroque music. You know, it's Bach and Handel and, you know, things from the 17th, 18th century seem to appeal more than the fancy stuff of Tchaikovsky and everything. And I hadn't listened too much to Mozart at this point. He came later, but it was all in there. And so I appreciated the sound of strings. And when I wrote A Salty Dog, the music to that, it didn't. I mean, I had the chords on the piano and I played it just like it is on the record, but nobody else really seemed to have anything to add to that. Not even Fisher on the organ, you know, who usually could come up with something special. You know, Rob Trower on the guitar, bless him, I don't think he ever even got the chords. You know, there was nothing for the guitarist to do. So the bass follows what the piano's doing, really. I mean, the great invention there from the group's point of view was B.J. Wilson on the drums. And if you listen to his introduction, his own intro on A Salty Dog, what he plays is like, how does he do it? Where did that come from, you know? He says, I am here, you know, it's the most tremendous. Well, that was 1969 probably. He'd already played something similar on his drum intro on Joe Cocker's with a little help from my friends.
Yeah.
BJ played drums on that, and if you just have a listen, you know, you have a listen to that, and you hear Joe Cocker singing it, and it's a very different version of the song of With a Little Help from My Friends, and suddenly B.J. Wilson comes in, and B.J. Wilson comes in on A Salty Dog. But apart from that, there wasn't much backing going on. I thought this would sound lovely with strings. Which, what are they? I suppose they're violins and things like that. I had to do a little bit of research, study things, to find out what was going on. Luckily, we had actually, in 1968, we toured with the Bee Gees in Germany, Procol Harum, and the Bee Gees had an orchestra with them, a string orchestra. So I was very aware of the sound that strings make, and they had very good arrangements, the Bee Gees, and of course being there, standing at the side of the stage, watching Barry Gibb, Morris Gibb, and come on, what was his name?
Robin,
sorry,
yes,
Robin. Singing away, you know, doing Bee Gees hits was great. But it was also great to watch the orchestra at work and hear the sounds, you know, through your ears. And Salty Dog I did that arrangement just after that tour. I got a bit of help from one of the musicians on that tour.
Right.
he was friendly on the gigs, and I talked to him afterwards. Victor, his name was, and a viola player, and I did pick his brains. Said I'd like to do this, and he told me about the ranges of the instruments, and when I finally finished it note-wise and what I thought it should be, he looked over it and said, yeah, that will work great.
Well, it's certainly a tremendously evocative piece of music, and if I can move you on a few years later, when you finally recorded a full album with an orchestra, the orchestra, the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra, and the album that followed, how did that performance come about? Because it had been it was only in 1971, I think, that you actually began to work on stage with an orchestra for the first time.
I think with the Edmonton, what we call the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra album, I think it came out in 1971. I think that we did the concert at the end of 1970, in November. A Salty Dog had come out in 1969.
That's right, yeah.
And at some point between, I think it was late 69 or early 70, we did play in Canada, in near Toronto, at the Shakespeare Festival in Stratford. We got an invite to play with their festival orchestra, and I said, yeah. It's only we'd had 2 or 3 albums out and didn't have much that we could play with an orchestra. Really, we had a Salty Dog, and then I thought that we also had this in Held 'Twas in I, the 20-minute suite from Shine On Brightly, that could be made into something a bit bigger. And I did the orchestration for that to play at the Stratford thing. It went great. The choir were great. They weren't a professional choir. They were all the actors, the Shakespearean actors from all the productions that were going on. But they were so enthusiastic. And I think we probably played a few Procol Harum songs, and then with the orchestra and choir, well, with the orchestra we did a Salty Dog, and then we did In Hell 'Twas in I. And it blew everybody away. It blew me away, because never played with all those other people giving it all that power. And it was remarkable, and quite a lot of people high up, if you like, in the artistic circles of Canada were actually at this festival, this Shakespearean festival, and one of them was the organiser of the Edmonton Symphony. And he said, well, things moved, and somebody said, can you come and play with our symphony orchestra? And by the time we said, yeah, love it. Robin Trout didn't actually like it so much, and he actually left. He didn't leave because we were going to play with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra. He left because that's the stage it was at, But Robin liked a lot of volume out of his amp, and bless him, when we played at that Stratford thing, he used a tiny little Selmer Little Giant, it was called, which was, no bigger than a transistor radio.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was as loud as he could be with this orchestra playing. If you were any louder, he would have drowned him out. So he wasn't really keen on that restriction on, volume is sound with the guitar. So he was probably, I don't think we could have made Edmonton with Robin Trower, because I don't think he would have been behind it.
No. But you found Dave Ball instead.
Yeah. No, Dave played great on it. And then the concert went ahead, and luckily we recorded it. Last minute thought. Last minute thoughts are usually the best. It was a very last minute was that I thought, we haven't got a fast one. I think I'll do an arrangement for Conquistador. Couldn't think of anything else that was remotely possible at that point in life. So I did a quick arrangement on the way up for Conquistador, expanded it a bit, made it more in character with, the invaders of Central America in Spanish, on their horses and everything. just expanded the idea into an orchestral version, which luckily took off at the time and gave a bit of poke to the whole idea.
Yes, because that was released as a single and was a big hit in America.
Yeah, it was in the charts in Britain. It was it did well. Big hit in America. Yeah, I mean, and pushed the album over there, of course. The top 5 album, which was best we'd done that so far. Yeah.
Did you find any resistance from mixing, the rock world and the classical world colliding, if you like? Did you find any resistance from the classical musicians you worked with in the orchestras? Were they open to your ideas and your thoughts as the way things should be?
It hadn't been done, in 1970, 69 and 70, it had not been done very much, if at all. Therefore, the world's orchestras had not really had the experience of playing with a rock band. Even at Edmonton, which was, Canada, Alberta, when we went for our first rehearsal, the orchestra had crash helmets on and earphones over their head. Not that they were listening to anything, it was to stop the racket of this rock band. We were quite insulted by that and just thought it was a bit off. We've got trouble here,
Yeah.
communicating and them being. But I think as it went on, that went away a bit. Just even on that gig there, I actually realised that this is quite enjoyable. We've got notes to play, and what they really are very impressed with the classical orchestras is how well they go down. I mean, you should have been at Edmonton. I mean, the crowd were absolutely rapturous. They came from all over America as well to see Procol Harum with a symphony orchestra. It was a star-studded audience, in tears at the end. It was really moving, and the orchestra had never gone down that well ever. They'd never even seen a reaction, like a natural reaction like that. They can play Mozart and Tchaikovsky all they want. They can play the whole ring cycle if they want, but they won't get a reception like they did there. They suddenly, this is good, isn't it? We like this. We and they're standing up and taking bows, and that spread, over the years. It's gradually got more. Orchestras are much more worldly now as playing with rock bands. I think they use us a bit. They use us, if the old box offices are failing a bit on the classical stuff, let's get Procol Harum in, or somebody. Let's have a good night and boost interest, But it does work, and they're much more adaptable and appreciative, and they know actually that the music is fun to play, and it is orchestration, and it fits in. That it's not a battle between Procol Harum and the symphony orchestra. It is a great amalgamation of the biggest sound you can ever imagine.
You followed that with on the Grand Hotel album. You then went into further orchestration, actually, on the album's title track as well. Did that inspire you to the Edmonton experience? Inspire you to work more with orchestras after that on a studio album?
I think that with Grand Hotel we did use a bit of orchestra. That was actually, apart from the one Salty Dog song, we'd never actually really recorded with an orchestra in the studio, and we were recording at Air in London at that time, and we didn't use full symphony or full anything like that. We just used some extra, big string sections or some horns and that here and there to join in with what we were doing. And I think it was, all right, this is Procol Harum. We can do strings and orchestrations, and they do fit in with our songs. Here it is in a studio of the utmost quality. And And we thought ourselves, right, now we're done with that. We've done our tasty orchestral thing, we've done it live and we've done it in the studio. Let's get back to rock in some way. Let's get back to a 5-piece rock band, which is what we then did after Grand Hotel.
And of course, a couple of albums later, you actually worked with Leiber and Stoller in the studio as producers on Procol's Ninth.
Yeah, well, we had a long association with Chris Thomas, which was brilliant. He's a brilliant producer. We discovered a lot of things together. You know, Chris, when he did the first album, he did Home, which was Procol's fourth album, before Edmonton or Broken Barricades. And he had never actually produced anybody before. But he was working for George Martin, he was following George Martin, and he'd helped out on the Beatles' White Album and done some of that stuff. And I said, no, I like Chris, I liked his attitude, and let's take a chance together, mate, you know. So we didn't give him a job, you know. We said, we'll do Home together, and Chris started producing, and was still producing Procol 5 years later or whatever it was.
Yes.
You know, but by then he was getting busy with Elton John or Paul McCartney or Roxy Music or something, you know. And he, you know, he went on and on. But, you know, after 4, 5, 6 albums, whatever it was with Chris, we just we all fancied a rest from each other. He fancied a rest. We'd been in the same studios for 3 or 4 years, which were very nice, but it's just like changes as good as a rest. And Leiber and Stoller came out of the woodwork, and it seemed like a good idea.
How was it working with them? I mean, did they adjust what you were doing well enough? Because
it was quite difficult. I would have thought it would have been easy. I mean, you couldn't meet a nicer guys than Jerry Leiber and Mike Starr. Ultimately experienced. I couldn't have more respect for a pair of writers and record producers and people that have been involved in what I think are some of the great classics of all time. And here they are. In fact, the first day was lovely. We met them and we said, always appreciated you, everything. And I came at 8 o'clock at night and they said, right, we're going to dinner. And we said, okay, what time will you be back? And they said, we ain't coming back, we're going to dinner. Well, all right. See you in the morning then. Yeah, we'll be here at 10:30. Oh. And so they went off to dinner and Procol Harum was sitting around the studio going, well, what should we do now? So we just started playing around and playing our instruments and everything. But it was quite odd because up till then I think we'd probably stopped recording. When we dropped, you know, it would be 4 a.m. or something. Ridiculous, you know. Sometimes you do go on a bit too long when you're recording, you know. There is a time when you should say, right, you know, I mean, if you've done 8 hours in a recording studio, that's actually plenty.
Yes.
You don't have to be there until 4 in the morning when you got in at, you know, midday. That's a long, long time, and your ears get tired, and you get tired, and everything goes wrong. Maybe Leiber and Stoller knew this. Perhaps they'd made all of the records they'd ever made, or songs they'd ever written. It was all done before 8 p.m.
Yes.
But well, that was the first shock. There was that, what are we going to do? We suddenly realised, well, you know, after a few days, we thought, well, we might as well go home as well, you know. So the hours changed. We did spend a lot of time playing a lot of their songs because all of the band, all of Procol Harum knew every Leiber and Stoller song there was, and I could sing every one of them, and we'd usually bang out a couple of those at 10:30 in the morning just to show off, you know. We said, well, then, you know, Mike Stoller one day, he said, well, we're not going to do that. Well, I think we just played Baby I Don't Care, which was an Elvis thing. He said, well, we're not going to record that, are we, Gary? I said, no, of course not, Mike, just playing it. He said, "I'll tell you what, Gary, that was the best goddamn version I've ever heard." So that was very pleasing.
Lovely.
It was very pleasing. Also, they had written a Peggy Lee album of songs. They'd written the songs, and they were going to produce it, but she'd dropped out something, or she got ill. And they, after we'd played 2 Leiber and solo songs at 10:30 in the morning, at 11 o'clock they would say, "Hey, just listen to this Peggy Lee song we got. You could really do a good job of it." And so they'd play us a couple of Peggy Lee songs that they'd written, which we'd go, "No." And then we'd get to recording some Procol Harum songs.
Of course, on that album as well, you had a hit single as well with it, with Pandoras Box.
Yes.
But that was something you'd written. I think you'd demoed it or recorded it, a backing track for the first album.
It was actually around a long time. I wouldn't tell the publishers that at the time, but it's too late now. Cat's out the bag. But the song was around for a long time, since 1967, I think. Interestingly, although not anybody really wants to know, but it was actually based on a Ravi Shankar, I think it was an early morning raga.
Really?
I was listening to a lot of Ravi Shankar, as one did. And there was this raga of his had this little thing going round and round in a circle, which went ding, 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 ding. Well, that's interesting. And Pandora's Box is actually that. I put some more interesting chords, and then it fitted with the words. And then suddenly Leiber and Stoller get hold of it. We put a marimba on it, and they mix it, and it's got the most fantastic rhythm and beautiful, wonderful sound. And suddenly Procol Harum are back in the charts.
Yes, back on top of the pops in this country and all the rest of it. But you had, in the 70s, you did one more album, something Magic, which I think is actually a strong record. But were you beginning to feel by that time that the effects of the punk and disco thing, was that starting to sort of creep in when you just after you recorded that album? Did you find that
it was going on even as we were there making that? I think that was in more or less kind of November, December '76. We went to Miami with some new American producers. I suppose that was following on from Leiber and Stoller. We ended up with these 2 American producers who had done well for other people. We thought that it would be a good idea. It was a kind of the place where you could actually stay there and work. You can record, you can live with the band, any wives or girlfriends that come along, you get catered. You know, it's very much a live-in, intense environment for a few weeks of making a record. And we thought that would be good at the time. We didn't realise that the 2 producers that we were working with didn't actually really like Procol Harum. You know, we must have had 14, 16 songs written and ready. And the first day there, we played them to these 2 guys. I mean, we were actually jet lagged, and we're still bashing out our new songs at 2 in the morning, which for us was like 5 in the morning. We were pretty tired, but enthusiastic. And then when we finished playing all these songs, they stuck them down on tape just to hear them. And they said, "Okay, guys, what do you want us to do?" We said, "We want us to produce it, or help us produce it." And one of them, he said to me, I don't know if you'll ever be able to use this, but he said to me, "Listen, Gary, you can take dog shit and you can cover it in chocolate, but when you bite into it, what do you got?"
Really? Dear me.
We should have actually packed our bags and gone home at this point. But, you know, once you've traipsed everybody there with all our equipment, that you think, well, no, we can get over this little hiccup, you know. but we should have actually gone home. We should have just packed and said, right, we'll
Yes.
find somebody else. But we didn't, and we had a bit of a battle with them in the songs that we had for that Something Magic album. I think in the end we actually recorded about 4 or 5 of these sort of 15 songs that we'd had written. We only got about 4 or 5 of them done. Though I did have an idea in the back of my mind from a Keith Reid idea. He had written this kind of fairy tale about the worm and the tree. And I had also had an idea about making it into a to something that whereby the instruments and the songs, the tunes I wrote, represented the characters in this little fairy tale of his. And I said, well, there's only one other one. Have you got anything else, guys? I said, well, there's one other thing, but it's only just working on the idea at the moment. And I played him a little bit of it. Yeah, let's have a go at that. And suddenly we're doing The Worm in the Tree, which was not totally fully written. It was also 20 minutes long. It was also spoken word, because I have never had time to write a tune. You know, to work on the music, and then normally if I've got some good chords and something going on, I can sing over the top of it with a bit of time for thought. But I never got the time for thought. I ended up speaking it. So we ended up, Procol Harum, 10th album or whatever it was, and one of the pieces is a 20-minute spoken work extravaganza of sorts. It got orchestrated as well while we were there. I did the orchestration, and violins came and played, and horns and everything. But when it was finished, we thought, well, we did this in 1968. We did 20-minute long thing. You know, we've sort of gone full circle here, and the punks are barking at the door, and disco is rapping, you know, in every dance floor. And it just seemed that maybe we'd done it. We had gone full circle. We seriously thought that. If this is what we come up with after 10 years, not that on reflection, I think it still might live again, The Worm in the Tree. I think it could be incorporated into the curriculum for teaching children how to express themselves, and they can be the worm, and they can be the tree, and they can be all the other characters in this thing. It's a way of expressing themselves through movement and and dance by listening to this little story. But nobody's done that yet, and nobody else has done any other version of it, or even wanted to listen to it.
Well, I think it's I have a soft spot for that track, that piece of music, that piece actually, Gary. But,
Thank you.
And thankfully, as you say, you did actually make another record as Procol Harum. In 1991, The Prodigal Stranger came out, and you've carried on making music with your most recent album being Novum, which I think is one of my favourite Procol Harum records. Actually, I think it's remarkably strong. Do you still have an enthusiasm for composition?
Yeah, kind of. I would say that I kind of lost it a little bit. Not the, if you like, talent or creativity, but the inspiration. It went a bit soft for a while. I mean, we had our 2003 album, which was called The World's on Fire, which did not set the world on fire. And also after that, you know, there was various experiences with past members and other things, and even personal health things, everything, you know, the world seemed to, you know, all attack at once. And it just knocked for a while the bit of the inspiration out of things. And it took quite a while to recover that. But finally, it was only last year, I think it was last year, it was last year. I finally thought, I'd like to, well, somebody said that we've been going 50 years. And I thought, well, we've got to do something. We can't just let it drift by. I mean, we're doing very well in live appearances and doing concerts and that, but we haven't got any new product. And I just thought we'll have to do something here. Well, the only thing to do, of course, is to make a new studio album. In order to do that, you've got to write some new material, and that material has to be up to scratch. It's got to be of a Procol Harum standard, whatever that is, and it's reasonably high. It's not throwaway stuff. It's thought about. You know, there is this creature behind us, behind the musicians and the writers and everybody, this creature called Procol Harum. It's greater than the sum of the parts sometimes. And I can go out and be Gary Brooker, or I could have called a band a totally different name to Procol Harum. But somewhere along the line there's this ship which we're all sailors on, and that's what we sail on, and that has, well, it's quite handy because it has got certain criteria. It's not really style, because Procol Harum style is Procol Harum. We've never been able to fit into a pigeonhole of pop rock or progressive rock or anything like that. You know, I've always said, or I've said certainly the last year or two, that, you know, the box starts with the P. The box, when it's not progressive, it's not psychedelic, it's Procol Harum. That's the only box we fit in. So, and there is such a thing as a Procol Harum record, and it sounds like a Procol Harum record, and the songs on it sound like Procol Harum songs, and whatever that creature is, that kind of lives on always.
And I think you certainly achieved that with Novum. I mean, it does sound like a Procol Harum record, and I think it's a very fine record.
There's a lot of different things on it compared to what we've done before. We all got involved in a lot of the writing, and it surprises me sometimes, but it is, whether it's because old Gary Boy's singing over the top, whether that ties it together or not, I don't know. But there's certain things, I can't sing everything. I can't sing every lyric either. You know, there's certain things I won't sing. I don't want to sing about it if I can't relate to it. If I don't understand it, or if it doesn't stir up some imagery, I can't sing it. And of course, certain tunes I can't sing, but if I'm writing them, that's all right, I can sing them. But they have to be interesting to sing, and they have to lyrically inspire one and make you want to sing them. So that's part of the criteria, let alone, you know, all the music and chords and everything else.
And those songs translate very well on stage, I think, as well, in live performance on that record too. I think they do sit alongside the classic repertoire, if you like, of Procol Harum very well. You seamlessly, I think. Yeah,
we've had the experience in the past year of playing the new set, if you like. Not the new set, I mean the songs from Novum. We don't play all 10 or 11 or however many there are. I think we usually find that kind of 7 or 8 interspersed with other things is about the right balance. You don't want to really shove a load of unknown stuff, which it was when it first came out anyway, unknown stuff to an audience that have come to see Procol Harum. They might, well, I just, you know, we have respect for the audience. Hopefully after years of playing, you get a little bit of a feel for what works and what doesn't, you know. And I wouldn't, you know, if people went home without hearing A Salty Dog, they'd probably cry for some reason. But luckily we can play them A Salty Dog and then they cry anyway. But you know, we can there's a way of working these things out in sets and getting a good balance. You know, it's interesting for the band as well, of course, to play different songs. You know, we do have standards that you could not get away without playing, but we've always used a lot of past repertoire and played it, of course, with band that, you know, some of them were never on the record or anything, you know, so it's new for them to do. We don't change anything drastically. That kind of upsets everybody. It upsets B.J. Wilson in his grave, even, you know. But it is sometimes you go, hey, let's get a new version of that, you know. And then people go, what's that? Well, I didn't even recognise it, you know, it's so different. Just write a new song. If you want to do something that different, write a new one.
Absolutely. Gary, thankfully Procol Harum is still very much with us, and I wish you all the best of luck with the forthcoming tour. And thank you very much indeed for talking to us on Cherry Red TV today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. On the 23rd of March, Esoteric Recordings, a Cherry Red label, is very proud to be releasing a 8-disc box set, Still There'll Be More, which covers 50 years of music by Procol Harum. There are 5 CDs in the set and 3 DVDs that are drawn from various performances on television in the UK and in Germany, beginning in 1967 with Whiter Shade of Pale on Top of the Pops, and going all the way through to 1977. And to unbox the album, if you like, with me today is Gary Brooker of Procol Harum. Gary, it's been quite an extensive labour of love, I think, from all of us here at Cherry Red. But also, I have to say, the material that you and your wife kindly sourced for this project in this book is absolutely amazing. It contains things and photographs that I've never seen before.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always been a collector of some sort. Well, I've just never thrown anything away. But frankly, my wife, she's very good at finding it, because I wouldn't know where it is. But she did, when we knew that Cherry Red and Esoteric were doing this, we had a good delve through the archives, or rather Frankie did, and found lots of posters. I mean, we could have an auction of posters. We probably will, you know, because I don't know what else to do with them. All photographs from, you know, right throughout the band's history, because we've been together 50 years, and we've got it all up to you. So she did a lot for that, but it was because, of course, I'm not an archivist like Bill Wyman is, but I just don't throw things away.
Well, thankfully you didn't, because there are some tremendous things in here. One of the things that I was very pleasantly surprised to find in here was the actual letter from I think the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra, sort of, or it's here we go. It's a letter from Richie York to you, which actually informs you that the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra are interested in working with Procol Harum. So it's little things like that. For such an important sort of milestone in Procol Harum's history, to actually have the original letter in there is quite...
Well, it is. I'd never seen it before, actually. Richie York was a journalist that liked Procol Harum very much. Always reviewed us kindly, but also was not happy with just doing that job. He wanted to, you know, help things move in directions as well. And he did, you know, he did actually push at that time in Canada and made sure that the Edmonton Symphony got together with Procol Harum. So well done, Richie York.
And you have some amazing photographs actually from that, from the rehearsals by the looks of it in here as well in this book. And you mentioned, of course, the extensive amount of posters you have. Most of them here are set out in the book in some shape or form, and they're works of art, I think, in their own right. Really,
some of them are works of art, but some of them you just look at the bill and you think, I can't imagine seeing that. Those three people together.
Well, one of the things that I was particularly pleased with was, which is why we decided to reproduce it in the box, if I can just get it out, is this poster which came from your collection, which is you, I think, at the New Theatre in Oxford, with Vivian Stanshall as your support act.
Yes, Vivian Stanshall.
How was that as an experience, Viv, supporting you?
Enlightening, interesting. Every day was new. I think got to know Viv. You know, apart from the fact he's actually from Southend-on-Sea, where I grew up as well. But of course, he was Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. I think wouldn't be offending him if I said he was eccentric.
No.
And I don't know, we just thought it would be a good idea, and it seemed to work well. I think I've seen from the poster there that it was not called Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, it was Viv Stanshall's Vivaria.
That's right, yes.
But it was, I think, was most of the people that were in the
Bonzos,
as we fondly know them. And he was a constant source of inspiration and entertainment from the moment of breakfast up until the close of the night. So he was a very, you weren't bored with Viv Stanshall around, that's for sure.
I mean, another interesting one here, which is a very early poster from October 1967 for the Volkshaus in Zurich. The first ever flower power show in Switzerland, it says here.
We broke a lot of ground.
Yes.
First ever flower power show.
And you're on the bill with the Creation, another long forgotten British band, but
yeah, I remember the Creations.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as I say, there's some amazing things in here. We were talking just before we started recording this as well about some of the television appearances that are on the DVD. Did you actually remember any of those things at all of these performances?
Quite a few of them are taken from German television, and during the 70s, which most of them are, this particular place in Bremen, and I think there was Mike, somebody that was in charge, the director, but they actually, you could play and they got a good sound for a band. And with all due respect, the BBC were not known for that.
No.
You could go in, a perfectly good band that could play well, had the right instruments and amplifiers, and the BBC could completely mess it up. But it was always a pleasure going. Mike Leckenbusch, I think.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. It was always a pleasure going there because he seemed to do interesting stuff. But you know what bands are like. They want to sound good, and he seemed to capture the sound if we were playing live, which we usually were. So that's Procol Harum are happy if you got the sound right. We might not look happy, but that's it's hard playing in a studio for half a day with no audience there. It's quite difficult.
Well, interestingly, some of the material that was in the German archives actually just shows the creation of those recordings as well, with you interacting, the band members interacting and conversing. On one of I think on disc 6, it shows you playing some Beatles songs while you're waiting for the crew to get going.
Well, I did see that, and
yes.
I thought, why am I trying to play Dear Prudence or Something in the Way She Moved Me, or I can't remember what it was now. But it seems that I was first on the set, and everybody else, it's taken 20 minutes to get there, and they finally drift in, man by man. I'm still banging out Dear Prudence or something else on the piano, waiting for everybody to come. I was just entertaining myself or trying to work out what that new Beatles song was I heard.
And also interestingly on disc 7, there's a whole 55-minute performance for the Musikladen show in Bremen, and only 2 of those songs were ever actually transmitted. So do you remember anything? Do you remember doing that sessions at all? Do you remember recording it?
I don't know. I mean, it's a long time ago, but you weren't doing TV shows every day with Procol Harum, so. But you know, going to Bremen for either Beat Room or Musikladen and that, it was always a pleasant experience because they actually did approach it very professionally. So you kind of, I don't say I remember the days whatsoever, but I do remember that going there was all right. You know, I mean, we've been to Spain, where, you know, the cameramen crash into each other, and they got the mic up the wrong end of the piano, and it's like a complete, and it's a manana, and
yes,
you know, wait round for 12 hours and then do half a song. Yeah. It's totally different. You know, in Germany in the 70s, that was professional outfit, which is what we were trying to be too.
Well, the final DVD in the set is a performance from Sight and Sound in Concert, which you did for the BBC at Golders Green Hippodrome, I think it was, in 1977. Do you have any memories of that, doing that show? Because it was towards the end of Procol Harum's initial first sort of 10-year phase.
Yeah, it was. It was quite close to the end. I mean, we did go on. We were doing a British tour, or we did one after that Hippodrome performance. And then we went on to tour America, but we had a personnel change when we got to America. So we were getting close to the, we think we've been, you know, we'd already made the album, what was probably our last album of that phase. We'd made that, and we were actually promoting it at this point, early 1977 and the gigs beyond. And when that was finally over, that was when we thought that we'd gone full circle and we thought we'd say goodbye to each other. It turns out it was just an extended break, that we would come back yet again. Again.
This set, of course, does reflect as well, because it goes on right up, and it contains tracks from every album, including your most recent.
It does go up to 2017, of course, from 1967, which is the 50 years, and you know, we didn't put out an album in every one of those years at all. I probably, you know, if there's 15 Procol Harum albums of new material, there's probably not that many, but there might be 15. That's not a huge output in 50 years. Not at all. Some people would have done 60 albums, you know. But we did have a break in the middle, and they are thought about a bit.
Yes.
And sometimes thought slows down, and it takes more time than you think.
Well, it's all celebrated here in Still There'll Be More, which is released on March the 23rd. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.